Welcome to the How to Health podcast. And today we have a repeat guest, which I'm so excited, Dr. Mark Faries. How are you?
I'm
Faris.
great this morning.
Faries. I keep wanting to say Faries. It's Faris.
You know,
I know
I've been
that.
called fairies my entire life, so that's okay. I actually think it's Farias anyway, so I've probably been saying it wrong myself.
Okay. Well, I don't feel so bad that I was like, I know how to say this. Okay.
It should be Faries, right?
Far.
F-A-R-I.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe this will be
You
the
know,
part.
you know what? I talked to somebody who knew ancient Gaelic,
Yeah.
oddly enough, and she said it was Faries,
Oh, well, that's I like it. It's very elegant. Faries.
which is what we
Faries.
go for here in Texas. Yeah.
Well, it's better than someone saying Marbus is Marbass. So hey.
Well, mhm.
I like thanks for the new name, my dear husband, but it's
Yeah,
okay.
that's right.
All right. But so today we're going to talk about building healthy habits, but I think we're going to get into much more than that because our pre-discussion was so amazing. I mean, I'm sitting here 45 minutes later and we were just talking about what we were going to talk about. And I was just like amazed. So I'm so excited to dive into your brain and see what you have to share. So let's start with what you were describing. You know, you have three different kind of scenarios or
Yeah.
I don't know how you would describe those
Yeah,
thoughts
it's
or,
yeah,
systems.
probably paradigms or systems.
Paradigms. Okay.
Yeah.
And we wanted to start first with kind of like what we would even do before behavior change and habits, which I thought was really amazing. Can you talk about that a bit as far as like where you start with your own individuals that you help or when you're teaching students how to be
Yeah.
practitioners like this?
Yeah, it's a good point. One thing that I've learned over the years is that I think most people would agree that behavior change is complex, and that behavioral maintenance might be even more complex. And that, as we talked, people use the word habit, and they throw that around, just develop this as a habit or exercise as a habit, eating fruits and vegetables as a habit. However, true habit represents something that's subconscious, right? It's automatic. You don't
Mm-hmm.
realize. It's not like people go to the gym and are like, "Oh my gosh, what did I do? I never realized I was there." Like that. That part was not habitual. Or did I eat? Like, did I eat today? Like, and it's not like eating is so habitual that we don't know we do it. Now, the steps leading up to that can become habitual. When my alarm goes off, I do this, and so a lot of the smaller steps. And so when we're talking about habit formation, and usually when people break that down, whether it be Dr. Lowley or Dr. Fogg, into these steps, that there is a hint at an understanding that there's a lot of things that go on beforehand. My original research where I started out was looking at emotional responses to triggers and discrepancies, mainly weight-related triggers. And so, for example, if you do a weight test or a body composition scan and you get those results, how does that make you feel? So if you found out that you're 40% body fat, or you have 100 pounds of fat on your body, or you weigh this much and you didn't realize that, or you find out you're pre-diabetic, or you find out you're hypertensive, you find out this information, how does that make you feel? And so I started challenging kind of current thoughts that such testing and these diagnoses are benign, and that, we just tell people what they weigh and they're going to be motivated to eat healthy and exercise, or we're telling them they're pre-diabetic, they're going to be motivated. And so I started moving even before motivation and looking at emotional responses, and then moving back before that and looking at why in the world are you even having this emotional response? Or I could tell two women in my research that they were 10 pounds overweight, for example, and have two completely different emotional responses. One would be angry and would want to throw the scale out the window, let's say, and one would be sad. And those are different. So then I started looking at why is there a discrepancy here? And then even before the why there, which we'll talk about here in a minute, is that was a process where they were aware of it because I made them aware, right? Because they were in the office, or they were in the research study, or they came in to get scanned or get weighed, and most of the time voluntarily. But what about the day-to-day things that we would experience that would make us feel like that, right? So if it's body image or weight related, what about if I'm walking down the street and I see my reflection in a window and I'm like, oh my gosh, is that the way I look? Or I see, what I've been hearing is on Facebook how it shows this is what you did a year ago or 2 years ago or something that'll pop up. And people are seeing themselves a year or two ago and they're like, oh my gosh. And wherever it's hairstyle or whatever it is, body weight, whether they've gained weight or lost weight, and so these day-to-day things that make them think about themselves and where they might perceive to be discrepant. But what are they discrepant from, right? And then that all is preceding the emotion. And so you're right. As I've started thinking more about this sort of paradigm, is I spend a lot more time before the behavior than I do in the behavior, where we miss out a lot. And so to conceptualize that for the audience in a simple way, the first thing to think about it is self-monitoring, awareness, paying attention on purpose. We can talk mindfulness, and I'm sure you have in some other podcasts as well, and doing that and being aware in a non-judgmental way. We are not our emotions, things like that. And I think that is all great. But at the end of the day, if I'm not aware, then I don't know where I'm discrepant. And so in some cases, we may want to avoid discrepancy. If I'm working with a normal weight or an underweight person and they keep trying to lose weight, especially in unhealthy means, then I don't necessarily want them feeling discrepant, right? But in most of our discussions, we talk about those who are either prevention of being unhealthy or they currently are unhealthy in some definable way, pre-diabetic, diabetic, classified as obese, something like that, right? So that's kind of the general framework that I'll come from with our discussion, knowing that there are caveats to this general paradigm. But in short, I have to be able to know where I am and when I am discrepant. And what I found is that people are really, really good at avoiding. They're really, really good at avoiding because, as we'll see, the third step in this is the emotion process, and we don't necessarily want to engage that sort of distress. And that makes sense to me. But we have to make sure our patients are monitoring. And this is why you have fitness monitors, you have food logs, you have daily or weekly weighing, self-weighing. There's a bajillion apps that contribute to self-monitoring. There's a lot of great research on what type of self-monitoring is more productive than other. Like typically, like we generally say that having a self-monitoring system that is low cognitive load, meaning I don't have to think very much. It's pretty immediate, so it's fast, and that's why, again, the fitness trackers are very beneficial when it comes to this. Giving that immediate feedback, there needs to be a goal, which we'll talk about next, and we need to monitor fairly consistently. The studies that show people who monitor intermittently don't do as well, especially in weight loss, as those who monitor more consistently. I think Dr. Jakisik of Pittsburgh had shown some of that research years ago with the SenseWear armband. And so you have to self-monitor. But when we self-monitor, what we're really saying is the information that I get, whether it be from the fitness tracker or the food log, I'm going to compare that information to some standard, correct? Mm-hmm. And so if I'm looking at my steps and I got 4,000 steps today, well, the standard is probably at least 5,000, goal 7,500, shooting for more than that if possible. And so then I'm discrepant in that scenario. I'm 3,500 steps discrepant. Well, that's because that is the standard that was given to me by some entity, 7,500 steps, or by my doctor, by my trainer, by the friend, family, whoever it might be. So these standards can be more objective in nature. 10 servings of fruit and vegetable a day. You have to weigh this number or this range of weight, and you'll be in a healthy range. So those are, again, a little more objective. But my standard might be, looking a certain way, right? It might be more subjective. A patient, her standard might be fitting into that little black dress. And so we have these standards of fitting in, of looking a certain way, of acting a certain way, that aren't tangibly made with some standard like a weight or a number of fruits and vegetable or a number of steps or minutes of physical activity a day. And so
So
people can hold multiple standards, in other words.
so you have external standards and internal standards almost. How do you uncover what those internal standards are and if they meet up with those external standards? Is there some conversation or
Yeah.
questions that you should be asking?
Yeah, I think you'd have to ask. You'd have to ask. Now, I don't think people go day and day knowing and thinking about what are my standards for today. So yeah, it would be uncovered in a conversation. An example might be, like, I don't know, with the body weight. Well, I'll give you an example. So there was a lady I worked with years ago. She was a faculty member actually at a university, and I said, "You need to walk. That's your next, phase in your getting healthier." She's like, "Yeah, I know. I need to," and I don't mind walking. So we made sense that would be the next best option. I was like, "All right, now you got to figure out where you're going to walk, right? So what days and times and where and all the details that go into planning for behavior." And she said, "Well, my neighborhood makes a lot of sense." And she sat there and thought, she said, there's a walking group in my neighborhood. I'm like, that's perfect. And she knew these ladies. I said, "Just join in with them and walk." She said, "I can't." I said, "Why not?" She said, I am probably 40 pounds heavier than those other women. I am way bigger than those other women. I can't walk with them. I can't, there's probably no way they would blow me out of the water. They walk faster. I couldn't keep up. Right. So her standard was the look and the physical capacity of that walking group. And because she didn't match up, clearly that drove her emotions and her behavior not to join that group. So I said, "Okay, no big deal. Let's find another place to walk." Right. I'm not going to, because if I would have forced that on her, clearly she wouldn't have done it. So I said, "Let's find another." And we found some other avenues. Weeks had gone by and she comes back in. I said, "All right, well, how have things been going? Tell me what's going on. How's your walking?" She said, this, walking's good, eating this. And then she said something about, and then I walk with the walking group on these days in the neighborhood. And I was like, "Wait, hold up. I thought this was the group that," I said, "What's going on here? Tell me about this." And she said, "Oh, well, I started eating better and lost a lot of weight. So now I'm the fittest, the lightest one, the smallest one. And so now it's completely okay for her to go walk with this group." And so, right. So now the standard, that group, she now is not discrepant, and she's actually on the positive discrepancy side. And that changes everything when we know that. So she didn't come out and say, "Look, this group is my standard and I want to match up to them." You know what I mean? Like that wasn't.
That's interesting because there's other people, for example, for me, I would want to run because I'm a runner with someone who's faster so I could get better. So that's how I see it. I want to be I perceive discrepancies as opportunities to grow. But it's interesting how she used it as judging herself and then but when she did meet those, she used that as a self-esteem engager.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
It is. So, and that's a great point, is that discrepancies, there are individual differences in how discrepancies are perceived and how they are subsequently handled. We're right in the middle of college football season right now, right? And so those athletes after the game the next day will go watch film on their performance, and they will probably see a lot of errors that they made. And subsequently, why would we put anybody through that? Why are you making me watch where I mess up? Well, in the sport context, it makes complete sense in that, well, now you know where to put your frustration, your effort into fixing the problem. So if you don't look to see where you're off or where you're discrepant, you're not aware, right? As we started out, then you don't know where to fix. But at the same time, this is your standard of play. See what you did. This is what you're supposed to do. And you're not matching up to that. Now, the coach could, like you said, more external, the coach could set that standard, or internal, the athlete could be watching this film saying, "Man, I'm not matching up to my standard. I didn't go as hard as I want to go." subsequently, it took being, and like you're saying, being discrepant to drive, but not everybody can sustain that sort. And so helping people experience discrepancy, not only with the standard. And so there's a couple things with the standard. We have to help patients make sure their standard is correct. And so one example, so I always ask my students, I say, okay, I have a problem. I can't run a marathon. And I'm really upset. So pretend I'm crying. Okay, I'm upset. I can't run a marathon.
I need some tears. Come on, real tears here.
That's right. Well, and so I've been training for 6 months, and I still can't run a marathon, and I'm so upset I'm about to quit. So what might be a question you ask? So I've been training for 6 months to run a marathon, and I can't.
I would say, what's your training? What have you been doing?
Okay, I've been walking 3 days a week for 6 months, about 30 minutes each time. And
that's it? You haven't been actually running?
No.
It's 30 minutes. Okay, so we haven't progressed in our...
Right.
So your standard's a little off because you would expect...
Hey, don't laugh at me. I'm crying, remember. I'm upset here, and you're laughing at me. Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
It's like they don't have the reality. They need... They're shifting their paradigm of what reality really is for a particular goal or standard.
But here's the thing. I really believed that walking 30 minutes, and this is a ridiculous example.
But that's very true though.
I say it's ridiculous. With weight loss, as you know, some people come in and they say, I'm trying to lose weight. I say, okay, well, why? And then what are you doing to lose weight? And they tell you, and you're like, you want to laugh. You're like, that's not going to work. Or it is going to work, but it's going to be really, really unhealthy. And so it's like making sure the standard is correct. The other thing is making sure and seeing how they value that standard, if they value it, and how much, right? So you and I were talking before we started this, and that if I value the way I look, my physical attractiveness, my body image, but I don't value my health, that's dangerous. If I don't have a standard for health, and I don't value health as a standard, like a systolic blood pressure, or a fasting blood glucose, or a number of steps per day, or a number of fruits and vegetables per day. You know what I mean? Like if I don't value or have a standard but I extremely value a standard that I have of the way I think I should look, that I perceive, I could put my health at risk to achieve that body image. I could take all sorts of drugs. I could venture into eating disorders. I could lose self-esteem. I could do some risky behaviors. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like you have these standards, and if I really, really value it, then other things. Now, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. If I value my role as a father, then I will give up things that I like and things that I want to do at times, maybe more often than not, to fulfill that role of a good father as best as I can. But again, I think I know what it takes, but if somebody might need to help me every once in a while, I might need to hear a good sermon and somebody preach, no, this is what a dad looks like. Then that helps me give a better picture of my standard. I already had the value of that standard, but I didn't necessarily have the details on what a good standard looked like.
I really like that, because I think that goes back to the need to have a community and to have mentors and those that you mentor. Because, we all may think that we may be experts in something, but even the best athletes in the world and the best teachers, and they all have coaches or mentors or someone showing them the way, or even someone just to look back and reflect on objectively what is not working and help us see outside the emotional component of that. So I think that's really key. And, you and I like to bring in the spiritual realm of that is small groups. That's why small groups are more important than sitting in the service, a large sermon. you need those small groups to help each other grow and share and
Yeah.
grow in the ways that we want. So yeah,
Yeah.
that is very, very good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But you also bring up the next third phase in that is that um, because these situations, it is good to have life groups. It is good to have group sessions in practice so you can engage that and have mentors and mentees. However, the discrepancy is going to become aware, right? So they're going to be aware of standards and how discrepant they are. Uh, Subsequently, the third step is the emotional response. And so um, let me say this: emotions are extremely complex, and we could spend many hours just talking about emotions. And to be honest, I don't have it all figured out, and it's somewhat frustrating reading the emotional research because I don't know, it's just complex, and the stuff that goes on biochemical versus the things that are more a kind of frontal lobe sort of
Cognitive.
experiential, cognitive.
I just tell people we're messy humans and we have to accept it, and then we keep going. So I get
It
it.
is, yeah. So, but in general, some theoretical perspectives I think help us that simplify things down is that emotions correlate to motivation, perhaps positively correlate or negatively correlate. So, for example, Charles Carver, Michael Shire, some of the folks who look at some theoretical perspectives on self-regulation describe a complex interaction of emotions, but there's been discussion with them and others about certain emotions being linked to higher effort or higher motivation. For example, generally speaking, many would agree that anger and frustration are very approach-oriented emotions. In other words, anger, I want to go after it. I want to fix it. Frustration is motivation tends to be high. Now, they may not choose the right behaviors, but it tends to be linked, generally speaking, theoretically at least, to higher motivation. Whereas sadness, feeling depressed, perhaps feeling despondent would theoretically be linked to lower levels of effort or motivation. So practical example, if I'm working with a patient and we run some tests, they get some feedback, and whatever the feedback was, the diagnosis was, we know there was a perceived discrepancy, and we ask, how does that make you feel? And they may say, it makes me frustrated. I'm kind of angry that I let myself go, that this or that. Well, theoretically, as a practitioner, I'm thinking what? Anger, frustration. I might have some motivation here. I might have some increased effort. So
Actually,
now,
just looking back on my own experience, you just saying that absolutely holds true, at least in my decades of, of practicing, is that those people who said, I'm frustrated with myself, I'm angry at that, they were the ones who did move forward and take steps. It's cool.
yes, that's right. And so that matches kind of the theory. And so that's a great example of practice. My job as a practitioner, though, if I'm sensing anger, frustration, and this higher level of motivation, like I want to fix this, my job is then just to make sure their standard's correct, and that not only means their outcome standard, but the behavioral standard. In other words, that they're doing the right behaviors to achieve whatever goal that they want to reduce that perceived discrepancy. But if I'm working with a patient and like, how does that make you feel? And they say, well, I'm sad, or they say that through tears, or they have to pause before they can get it out. You can just tell that and then they start internalizing that as, I'm a bad person, and their self-esteem is now being threatened, or some other aspect of their self is being threatened. They may have little motivation following that meeting. And so I have a few options. I think one, as the practitioner, it would be great if we could help them at least see it in a way where they're hopefully frustrated at least before they leave. I'm okay for you to be upset, in a negative way. You're probably going to feel negative. You don't have to be happy that you're discrepant, but if I can get them to the point to where they're like eager, ideally, to fix that discrepancy, frustrated, maybe angry, are just not as upset, then I have something to work with from an effort motivation standpoint. It would be wrong for me to let them leave my office like really upset, because odds are they're not going to engage the behaviors that we want them to engage. And again, they start internalizing things as I'm a bad person. They attribute those discrepancies to their own faults, their own issues, their own past, their own expectations, etc.
So,
right?
Yeah, so when you have someone though that is sitting there, for example, I had someone who we would do a body analysis. They would step up on the weight. It does fat content analysis, what's your composition, body composition, how much pounds of fat percentage, how much lean muscle, water, whatever. And one of them I knew would be very emotional because she was over 500 pounds at her guess, and she was correct. So when she stood up there though, but I had already been having this dialogue in my own head, how I was going to react, because I knew how I reacted was going to help pave the path for her. Because if I was reacting in a sense of, kind of nonchalant, well, you have been eating this way for so many years and whatever, I think that takes the empathy of it. But my reaction was, okay, so just think of this as a baseline, and I promise you, you'll never see that number again. And she went on to lose over 100 pounds in 3 months. So, I mean, that, giving, I think how I respond to is really important.
Yeah.
Because they're going to look to me as a cue as to how they should react. I think in that moment of vulnerability. So I think it's really important that we're aware of our own emotional responses to a patient. We don't, make those weird facial gestures or make some offhand comment, unless you have a really strong relationship with the patient and humor or something might be better. But that's really important. I think that we look at our own judgments and how our emotional response is to that as well, because it's a problem. For me, I take on the problems of the patient. I consider them my own because I really want to be involved and emotionally connected with that patient, so they know that there is someone who really cares. But yeah, that's very good. So how do you do that if you have someone who does have that really negative, despondent response to that? How do you help them leave your office in a better or higher motivational state and ready to change up? What do you do?
Yeah, there'd be no one quick formula for everybody, clearly, but I think you're right. At the base set, medical judgments are made, but it doesn't mean that those have to turn into social stigma. They have to turn into discrimination. They need to. We have to watch, and sometimes we don't even know how our faces look when we react, and so we at times can be stigmatizing someone and not even really know it. And so we do have to be aware of, especially with situations like those classified as obese. We just need to be highly aware. And I think one step is clearly through relationship, and that showing that we do care. Love goes a long way. And at the end of the day, love casts out fear, and that if they know that they are loved and that they're truly cared for, and I don't know if that's something that can be faked. I'm sure there are people that can fake that and do it in relationships all the time, unfortunately. But in this case, I think the sincerity of the relationship would be the first and main key point. How that translates into words and prescriptions and actions, I don't know. And others might be able to talk to that from more of a psychiatric sort of a way and process. But in my experience, it's the relational aspect. I mean, think about the patient. If they were 500 pounds, 400 pounds, 300 pounds, I mean, the biological impedance scale that you put them on, is it really telling them anything they didn't already know? What it's doing is just giving them details, and it's making them think about themselves in a detailed way. Engaging myself, which we talked about earlier, to think about where I don't match up. And then somebody's just saying, well, not only are you 400 pounds, you have this many pounds of fat. This percentage of your body is fat. You only have this much muscle. Plus, look at your diet. Oh my gosh, this is what you're eating. This is how far away from where you need to be eating. And you got to get more active, and your job is sedentary and looks like you're stressed and depressed. And it's just like, we may not be using that tone, so to speak, hopefully not, and just ripping them into where they're faulty, but they may be hearing that. And to get to that point of weight, they might have been very good over the past many years of avoiding those sort of internal conversations, internal analyses, sort of self-reflection and self-evaluation. And subsequently, that's how they were able to get to the point that they are. So in one meeting at the doctor to engage all that is a very emotional, and it makes sense to me why patients will shut down on their doctor and even never come back if that's the case. But if it's presented with this sort of awareness on the practitioner side of judgment and the emotions and the concerns of those other people, and that they are a human being, and that my job is probably more relational at this point. And I think you and other doctors and healthcare practitioners would say how much of your day-to-day job is more emotional and psychological than it is technically prescriptive from a physical standpoint.
They never told us that in medical school either. It was all about the mechanics and like you said, the technical know-how of everything, of disease. They never ever mentioned the rest of it. And I'm actually very thankful that I went to medical school later. I had already been married, I already had 3 little kids, I already had life experience, because that alone was so much more valuable in so many more circumstances.
Sure. Gregor always makes the joke about, once he shows the diet as leading risk factor for premature mortality and disability, he makes the joke about, clearly that's the first thing we learn in med school. And but the same joke can be made with emotions and motivation and psychology and patient interactions and relationships. And but if I'm spending 5 minutes with my patient, 10, 15 minutes, then how does that practitioner engage on all these needed, wonderful, personal connections? Maybe it's not the doctor, maybe it's that staffer out front. Maybe there's practices out there where patients get none of that with anybody at that practice. They go for, which, to be honest, I'm okay with that. I don't expect the doctors to do everything. And so if you want to engage that in your patients, that's brilliant. But if another doctor wants to do what they were trained to do in med school and not overstep bounds and get into some areas, I'm okay with that too, especially if they can connect them. But you know what? I don't have time. I'm picking up on some things. There's this group I want to connect you with at the local church. They meet and they talk about some of these things, or there's this program, or we got this CHIP program, or we got this or that. And they're able to be sort of a facilitator or administrator. That's like the classic family practitioner, right? Come in, I'm the first line of defense, and I can answer these questions, but I'm noticing there's an issue in the joint, or there's something in the endocrine system, or this, that I'm not an expert, so I'm going to get you over to the specialist and I'll kind of monitor and see how things are going. Well, we could do that with motivational issues, emotional issues. And I don't think it's just about the heavy psychiatric things like major depressive disorder or anxiety disorders. Clearly, we need to get those people to where they need to go, or extreme body image dysmorphia, self-esteem issues, suicidal thoughts. Those are extreme. What about all the precursors to that? Anxiety disorder. What about resilience? What about positive emotional kind of thinking? What about mindfulness? What about stress management? What are all the preventative things that we could be doing?
The positive psychology stuff is so fascinating to me. I mean, I've dived deep into that, and you were so exactly right. But I think, the practitioner, obviously, I know there are different personalities, and some doctors don't want to do this and there's obviously a spectrum of where we are. I tend to be much more emotional. No, go figure. But the thing is, though, I think all of us should understand the tools of coaching, almost in a sense, that coach them into going to that community group, or coach them into going to see the specialists that we need them to, coaching those, what you said, those positive emotional responses, understanding that they can thrive, giving them hope. So I think that's a big component of medical school that we're missing, is understanding that how we connect and the verbiage that we speak with our patients is so powerful. But yeah, you're right. You have to respect the boundaries that people want to set for themselves.
Yeah, you know what? It's an honor to be a doctor, a healthcare practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
It's an honor.
Right.
It's nothing taken lightly. The power that a healthcare practitioner has over their patients is astounding. Mm-hmm. For good, for bad, for neutral, but the power that exists, the beauty that can come from such an honorable profession at its base foundational core, the empathy that you have expressed, that you share with every single patient that comes in, it probably is what makes you a very good doctor. It probably gives you value in life, and gives you passion in life, and you've probably found your niche then, and your calling where it needs to be. And I think people can do that in a number of areas in whatever career path that they choose. Healthcare practice is clearly one of those, as is fitness, as is nutrition, as is banking. I don't, you know what I mean? So the idea is that it's an honorable profession, but during the med school process, when I start my clinicals, if I start losing empathy, and then by year 4, I've maybe eliminated it, and then I move into practice and all the stress of paperwork and billing and the job and bills and student loans, and I got to see 60 patients today, and all of the other nitty-gritty that occurs, plus I'm in a town where there's no other things for me to send people to, or I don't know other people, and I'm dealing with my own weight and health issues. I'm dealing with my own self-esteem issues, my own this or that. The empathy and the expectation that the practitioner can even just quickly adopt this is missing the boat as well. So the resources and the care that we provide for them, with high levels of burnout and suicide rates in healthcare practitioners, especially physicians. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just a complex interaction of mental inside the patient. It's, again, the practitioner, their background, how they're interacting, their facial expressions, the reasons going into it. But you notice, Laura, that we get finally to the fourth thing, which is behavior, right. The fourth major. So we just got to behavior, the actual prescription, not to mention when they do that first behavior, what happens then. Mm-hmm. So David Williams and others have shown that one exercise bout, so one 30-minute exercise bout in non-exercisers, can predict how active they are 12 months later.
Wow.
Specifically how they feel on they use what's called a feeling scale. It goes from -5 to +5 through 0, the feeling scale. It's very commonly used. And you just circle good or bad, right? Just kind of where you fit on that scale. How did that 30 minutes make you feel? Every increment, I forget how many minutes it was. It's like every increment increase on that scale in regression predicted like extra. You'd have to check me on this. I can't think of what it was, but it predicted several like 27 more minutes of physical activity each day. Again, don't quote me on that. I'd have to look it up. I can get it for you later. But in short, how they felt predicted how active they were, not only 6 months, but 12 months later.
So you're meaning the positive response to exercise predicted how, in the future, how much they would actually be exercising, because it's a reward system, right? Like, you feel good, you want to do it again. But what if they had
the reward is in there? Yeah.
What if they had a negative experience with exercise. Maybe they went and they were just so out of breath, and they went to a gym and they're seeing all these beautiful bodies walking around scantily clothed, and they're like, overweight and have, no self-esteem. What, even though they exercise, is that that negative also have a negative predictor of?
Yeah, it's a good thought. This research you're referring to is just looking at the feeling state. And so more of the physiological response to that.
Okay.
In other words, they weren't exercising with, real good looking people around them, and they thought they were not good looking, or that would be a cool study. Well, we actually had a study designed to do that, believe it or not. Years ago, I was on a stair climber in the gym. This was many years ago. But I was facing sort of the mirror dumbbell, the way the gym was set up.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the trainers, wasn't that long ago, but the trainer was, you could tell it wasn't as knowledgeable probably on the emotional aspects of client interaction. And so he was working with a lady that was, she was heavier set, but you could tell just on her face, she just felt awkward.
Mm-hmm.
She was new, and he was trying to get her doing these complex lunges and this and that. And her butt was facing all the cardio equipment, and she may have not been bothered by it, but she stood up and turned around, and her face just maintained like this embarrassing red color. And I was thinking, as I was on there, she's never coming back. And I also thought, she's probably going to go eat worse to cope with this. And so exercising at the gym could make her eat worse. And so I had this idea. And so we actually had some undergrads who were going to test that. Exercising around others, and not did it affect dietary intake following the exercise. We didn't follow through with it. We did a few pilot, but it's an interesting thought when you add in the social nuances, the sort of the social norms, so to speak, that are very, very difficult to navigate for a lot of people in the gym. Do I grab this towel? Do I not? Can I take it? Do I wipe? Where do I put it when I'm done? What is this machine? Do I get in it? Do I, that person just left. Are they coming back? Can I slide in? Like, there's all of these things, plus again, the self-presentational concerns, the confidence concerns that, I don't think it's a stretch. I would agree that those would clearly be influential in somebody's decision to continue that or not. Think about any other situation you would walk in and feel that way, non-health related, in any other aspect of your life, to walk into, so it's like walking into the electronics store, which I won't name the name of the store, where they just hound me every corner. Can I help you? And I know they're trying to be nice, but at some point, I don't go there anymore. That experience is so bad. And if I had to go there for a particular reason, it would not be pleasant, and so it affects my motivation to go to that particular store. And I started shopping around for other options. There is research on how colors, like the visual colors, affect emotions like exercise, like red and black and silver chrome tend to be much more aggressive than lighter colors. Music has been found. There's a really neat line of research on music and affective or feeling state responses.
Oh, yeah.
Dissociation from the fatigue and the physiological discomfort associated with exercise.
Well, I'll tell you,
music and all that.
Well, when I run, so I'm training for a marathon in a few months. And when I get to those longer runs, it's so easy in my head to go, do you really want to do this? You can do it next time. It's because marathons are not my favorite distance, but I'm doing it because I was asked to. And the music, if I change it to certain song, some of my favorite groups are Need to Breathe. And there's just something about some of their songs is just like, it motivates you. It's like, yes, I could do this. It's just changing your thought and your mind, and they just push through, even though my body's like, oh, stop for heaven's sake. And it's so true. It's so amazing. Yeah, I think that's true. We all look at behavior and maybe encouraging people to look at that dynamic or be aware of it, at least where you're going to go put yourself. You don't want to put yourself uncomfortable when you're trying to start something new,
Yeah. That's right. And we're talking exercise, and I think that's usually where we have the biggest. But, I worked with a lady years ago that I was like, her lunch was really, really bad. And I've used this example before, and I might have used it on the last podcast, but she was eating, well over 1,000 calories just for lunch. Usually it was some kind of Mexican food taco truck or queso, something like that with her group at work. I said, look, we're going to switch this up. I say, I don't care what you eat. We just need to eat something healthier. What do you like? Tell me some things that you already like that are healthy. Trying to tap into intrinsic motivation, right? And autonomy. Mm-hmm. And so she brought this and that. Then she got on salads and and this salad. And then you mix it with this and then get this lettuce and arugula and dressings and walnuts. And besides getting hungry, I was like, oh my gosh, this is our answer. You're going to bring a salad to work. It's like in my mind, I'm thinking I'm the best practitioner ever. I just figured out. And she said, I would, but I can't do that. I can't bring a salad to work. And I'm thinking, why not? She says, if I bring a salad to work, everybody's going to know that I'm on a diet. I don't want people to know I'm on a diet. I'm like, okay, well, let's find something else. And so that self-presentational concern, social concern that was a standard that she had to maintain, and healthy eating threatened that standard. And so, we found other ways that weren't as, where she could eat and not feel like, and if we got to do that up front, I don't care if it's healthy, I don't necessarily care what it is. And so, but to say you got to bring a salad and kind of dictate those things without assessing, again, the standard, how much that's value, is it correct? Again, her standard at that time might not be correct, in my opinion, but at that time, my job wasn't to change that. We could talk about it, but it was to sort of work around that in a way, because she did value health and she did value the diet that she needed to be on. We just needed to come up with a way that wasn't socially oppressing, at least in her perception. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what's really cool about it is just looking at her and being insightful enough to even be able to verbalize that. So it makes me wonder, had she experienced that before? Had she tried to bring salads and someone's like, oh, why are you eating healthy, or you're on a diet, and she didn't want to be, isolated to that, social stigma, oh, the dieter over there is eating healthy. Yeah, so that's really interesting, but it was a great learning opportunity for her to think about that too, and think of other ways and think outside the box. That's really cool.
Okay. Yeah, and past experience, like you said, is something we probably key into when it comes to these things.
Very much so. What else about behavior? Is there anything else about behavior before we move on to your gears and goals?
Well, one thing probably is maybe with standards. You have standards for the outcomes, mm-hmm. But you also have standards for the behaviors, and to be honest, if the behaviors don't happen, then the outcomes aren't achieved. And so at times we can put so much focus and emphasis on the outcomes that in setting goals for those, I want your blood sugar to be this, I want your weight to be this, as a practitioner, but also internally as humans, that we don't necessarily put the same emphasis and the same precision of setting goals related to the behaviors that have to be accomplished to get to that point. And so this general system of self-monitoring, being aware on purpose, ideally mindfully, knowing what the standard is in that discrepancy and knowing the emotions that come from that discrepancy and how those are coped with. And subsequently, that's what drives behavior. I personally see exercise and healthy eating as coping for most people. And the reason I say that is because in a lot of people, again, this is generally speaking who I've worked with in the past, especially like new exercisers, they don't like exercise. They don't know they like it. And to be honest, there's parts of exercise they may never like. I weight train most days of the week, but I don't like it. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't say I'm to the point now after all these years, I don't mind it. And I feel very confident in my abilities to do it. But I listen to Dr. Tony Evans when I work out and at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship. And so he's my workout buddy. And so his podcast every day. And that's sometimes I'll listen to music, like you said, but like it's not intrinsically motivating, in other words, because intrinsic motivation would mean that I inherently enjoy it. And even if it did not provide me with an extrinsic benefit like muscle mass or body image or fitness, flexibility, muscular endurance, whatever it is, I would still do it. But I don't know if that's the case. If it didn't give me benefit, I don't think I would struggle giving weight training up. If I didn't have to brush my teeth, I would not brush my teeth. It's not intrinsic. Like, there's nothing about the foam and the spit and the bristles on my gums that I enjoy. Some people do. Some people do enjoy weight training like that. Some people do enjoy walking. Now, walking, yes, I would do it because intrinsically, inherently, I personally enjoy that. But I don't get that same thing from weight training, even though I do weight training every day, right? So there's this. So to me, when I feel weak or unhealthy, or think about my, being able to play sports with my kids, or, when I feel discrepant from a standard that I want to have and be, weight training and subsequently is just my problem-focused coping to deal with that discrepancy. It's not because I love it. And a lot of times early on with people don't necessarily know they like exercise. The elliptical is just their problem-focused coping. It's just their choice to cope with whatever distress they feel from whatever discrepancy they perceive. Comfort eating would fall into that as well, emotional eating. Alcohol, any other coping. Now, there's a big separation, which we can get to in another podcast if you want to do a third round, which would be dealing with.
I think we should do these monthly, honestly. This is it's really good.
Like the emotion-focused coping versus problem-focused coping, and how both are good, just in particular context, and when I need to utilize one versus when I need to utilize the other. Can I change this or can I not change this? And how to perceive that and cognitively appraise that situation. And in short, for a lot of people starting out, and I did this at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine presentation years ago, but the first thing I started talking about was that our patients don't necessarily value plant-based diets as much as we do. They might moving forward, but right at the get-go, when you start talking about it, it's not like they can come in valuing it because they saw forks over knives or some, and it kind of got them thinking. They got through the process before they got to, but odds are they don't value it near the same level that you do. And so you're telling them about it, this whole food, predominantly plant-based diet, and you value it, you love it, you practice it, you read about it, you do podcasts about it, you talk to these other experts in your own free time. I bet you learn about it.
All of my free time.
Right. So
I don't. If I'm running, I'm listening to podcasts about it, or the positive psychology. I'm so entrenched in my life, my family. I'm texting my daughter in medical school about, you guys got to read this about this positive psychology. This will be great for you and your patient. I mean, I'm overwhelmed. Yeah, so I understand.
It's a part of who you are. It's a part of your identity now. You've embedded that, integrated that perspective. And people say this all the time. I'm a vegan. I'm a vegetarian. I'm a marathoner. I'm a CrossFitter. I'm an Ironman, Ironwoman. I'm a whatever. And I'm an exerciser. I'm a healthy eater. They've adopted an identity. So if I hear somebody say, I'm an exerciser, then versus I exercise. So I'm married into a golfing family. My wife played college golf. Her dad, her uncle are extremely good at golf. Her mom's good. Her grandfather was a college golf coach. I married into a golfing family. I will not tell you I'm a golfer. I love playing golf. I don't get to play it near enough, and I really enjoy it. I love the psychology behind it. My good friend, Dr. Eric Janegi, who I've talked to you about, is phenomenal, and we talk all the time, and I read about it here or there, and so. But I have not adopted the identity of I'm a golfer, because that means I would have to play at a certain level. I would have to have certain types of gear and clubs, and golfers don't use the cheap stuff. Golfers get the good stuff, or whatever my perception is relates to golfer. But
the discrepancy, right? There's a discrepancy,
and that would drive my behavior. Now I gotta, because I'm a golfer, I gotta play more days per week because I'm a golfer. I got to give up time with my family, or I give up this, or give up this, or that, or this, because that's who I am. If I am an exerciser, and so an example I use, and I've heard this somewhere, and I can't remember, somebody told us before, but let's say you have, might have been Joe Sicolo, but if you take two people who have been abstinent from smoking for, let's say, 12 months, 1 year, and they come in and we ask them, are you a non-smoker, or are you still trying to quit smoking? And first one says, well, I'm a non-smoker. I haven't smoked a cigarette in 1 year, right? So I'm a non-smoker. We ask the other one, he says, I'm still trying to quit. So think about the two identity differences. One has adopted the non-smoker identity. Theoretically, if that individual is in a tempting situation with friends or at a party or whatever, they will have greater probability they will not smoke a cigarette because I'm a non-smoker. I don't smoke. That's me. That's embedded into who I am, right? Into my identity. Where the other person, I'm still trying to quit, they haven't adopted the identity as a non-smoker. They could have a higher probability of actually smoking and falling off the wagon, so to speak, and relapsing into some previous behavior. Same thing with I'm a healthy eater, or I'm still trying to eat healthy. I'm an exerciser, or I'm still trying. And so there's things with the way we view the behaviors. Like, do people like the taste? What's interesting, people don't talk about it. If you go and look at any of these great plant-based posts on,
the verb, I can't. There you go. You're back. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't know what happened. So if you go look at comments posted about, like on Facebook or any of these, let's say we're talking plant-based. So let's say a plant-based post, whether it be a movie or a study about this or that, or dairy is not good, or meat, or whatever the comment's about. If you go look at the comments, you get all the comments that agree, but clearly, like in politics, you get the comments that don't agree. And talking about, they show some plant-based food, and somebody will inevitably say, why would anybody eat? That's gross. It doesn't taste good. And so if they have a perception that eating healthy is cardboard and grass, which, as we know, is clearly not the case. It's so good. And if you can't listen to a Dr. Stoll presentation and not come out being like, man, I just want to go eat so much colorful, beautiful food that I possibly can, and so we're foodies, right? There's we see all these cooking shows, but a lot of times it's not necessarily plant-based. It's baking shows or cupcake wars or whatever, but we assume, and then when we see TV shows or anything where they have to eat their vegetables, or they have to eat this or that, or these are gross, people develop these paradigms, these perspectives of what healthy eating is. Exercise is hard. So like with older adults, I've commonly seen that if I use the word exercise, they shut down because they think exercise is for young people. It's intense. You got to wear matching outfits. You got to sweat. Muscles are going to burn. It hurts. They're sore. There's injury. That's their perspective simply using the word exercise. If I use the word physical activity, and I talk about moderate intensity physical activity, such as a brisk walk, such as gardening, such as this or that, they're like, they don't get that same shutting down experience. It's much more palatable when it's turned in those. We're talking about the same things in a lot of ways, right? Physical activity, exercise is a component, a type of leisure time physical activity, as is gardening. And I can become very, very healthy without exercise. Planned, programmed, very strategic exercise type, detail-oriented physical activity. I could become very healthy with brisk walks, with gardening, with being an active lifestyle. I could still meet 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity physical activity without technically exercise. But we interchange physical activity with exercise now. And so exercise in certain people has embedded certain connotations, a bias, so to speak, a confirmation bias, so to speak, and that we have to accommodate that. If I don't have a positive feeling about this behavior and I have this negative emotional response, then me exercising, doing something that I don't necessarily enjoy, is just to cope with that discrepancy and those emotions.
Well, there's so much there we could continue to
There he is. I know.
un- unwrap. That's wow. I really like though the idea when you're talking about the problem focused coping. I never thought of it that way of looking at this before the behavior. I mean, that's just a whole nother world that I never dreamt about would
Yeah.
be these emotional responses is discrepancy, what they're comparing themselves to and how they dealt with it. And
Yeah.
wow. Yeah,
All right. So
it's
I'll
incredible.
send you a link. I have a publication. I'll send it to you. But
Okay.
with me and Dr. John Bartholomew, um, it was a study we did years ago that it developed a scale called the weight cope. And what I found was from those interactions, specifically with women, the emotional responses to body composition and weight testing, the variation in emotional responses, that the testing was not benign, the variation in motivational responses, and then subsequently the variation in what behaviors they chose to cope with that discrepancy and those emotions. So to them, a problem-focused coping might have been not eating for the next 3 days. To them, it was fixing the problem, their perceived problem, which was their excess weight. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Others would pursue emotion-focused coping, comfort eating, even though it was completely opposite maybe of what they should have been doing, or some combination. And so we embedded into a couple of studies to figure out, with some qualitative work, with a larger validation study, to note how the variation in these coping responses. But in that article, the sort of setup introduction, it talks a lot about what we're discussing here in a little more detail about discrepancy, the theory behind that, the emotional responses, the variation, and subsequently how we tend to cope and how we could define in maybe a novel way problem and emotion focused coping as it relates to self-regulation of behavior, which really before that study, to my knowledge, hasn't really been done. And even though I do that, I don't know of a lot of people that discuss it in that way. And there'll probably be people out there that would disagree with me, but that's okay for discourse as well. But I can send that study to you, and that way you can have that.
I don't know how they could disagree with you, because it makes complete sense just from the practitioner standpoint, taking care of patients. And it's really amazing just to make a practitioner aware of that, a doctor aware or a registered dietitian aware that these will be, what's going on. I mean, just to think about the complexity of their emotional response is more than just what I'm seeing right there in that moment. There's a lot of thought process that's going on. So I think that's really valuable tool to, for us just to even be aware of it. Honestly, I think that's a huge step.
Yeah, and a lot of this, to be honest with you, is awareness at this time. I'm working to develop more and more tangible ways to do this. But what I'll do is I'll kind of transition into the last two major components, which I think are a bit more tangible when it comes to.
Right.
We've been highly kind of theoretical at this point, and I think probably most people listening would be like, completely in agreement. And they may not have thought about it that way. And awareness is key, but even for us, as we learn more on these processes that occur, trying to help behavior becomes any form of habit. The thing that we need to conceptualize is, once we kind of get to the behavioral part, we end up setting goals, correct, to accomplish in some period of time. And we learn about SMART goals and all that. But I want to present a little different perspective that others have talked about before, but maybe in this realm we haven't heard of. And so I want to kind of picture this, if we can, as three gears. A large gear at the very top. Okay. This would be a B goal, BE. So I want to be healthy. I want to be fit. Goal. Oh my gosh, that's a very good gear.
Oh, you don't know.
Are you an artist?
I've actually published 6 books all about drawing and visual mnemonics, how I got through medical school. You'll have to look those up.
Did you really? Okay. You send me something. I'll have to buy one. Can you autograph it and draw this gear system and autograph that?
I'll set it all up, or you can have it for free.
Yeah. So I use technology to clean up my doodles. Yeah. But that's exactly right. And you might have to show this to the viewer at every step. You going to do that?
Okay. Yep, I
Okay.
am. I'm already
All
working
right.
on this medium one.
So I'm going to use my hand, and then they can see what it looks like. All right. So at the top, you have a big gear called the B goal. I want to be healthy. I want to be fit. I want to be whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's say there are a list of things that I have to do in order to be healthy. So under that gear, have you already drawn it? See, it's
Smaller
connected.
one.
That's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a kind of a medium-sized gear. So
Just
that's called
yeah.
that's the do goal, D-O, the do goal.
I need to make the T smaller.
So an example that's been used before in the research has been, I want to be healthy. So let's say I believe for whatever reason that I need to take a multivitamin. And let's say, again, some people agree with that, disagree, whatever, but let's say that patient thinks that or believes that in order to be healthy, I need to do this. I need to take a vitamin.
Right.
Or as we've talked in the context of today is my do goal might be to be more physically active. Might be I need to do exercise. I need to do a whole food, predominantly plant-based diet. I need to start at least transitioning. I need to add one more vegetable a day. I need to, right? So these things I need to do.
Right.
Right. So that's the middle gear. The third gear is a smaller gear.
Right.
That's attached to the bottom of the do goal. And this is called the action goal.
Yep. I'm working on that one.
Okay.
Because it's spinning faster, correct?
So if we talk of speed of the way we accomplish these, yes, the B goal, well, let's start with the action goal. So first off, the action goal is the things I got to do moment to moment, day to day in order to do. So if I need to take a vitamin, well, I got to buy it. I got to remember to take the cap off. I have to actually take the cap off. I got to pull that little cotton, whatever that is, out of there. I got to fill up a glass of water. I got to put the pill in my mouth. I got to drink it or chew the gummy or whatever it is. If I need to do exercise, I got to buy a gym membership, or I need to find a place to exercise. I got to buy shoes. I got to buy this outfit. I got to get this. I got to get my music downloaded to my phone. I got to put my bag together. I got to find a babysitter. I got to check out the daycare at the gym to see if my kid would even stay there. Are they qualified? So I got to do my research on them. I got to ask this person this. There's all of these action steps that have to occur in order for us to be doing that behavior. So there it is.
Action to the do to the be.
That's perfect. So you notice, so hold that up there so everybody sees. See that action goal is spinning, for me, it's spinning this way. So it's spinning really, 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 really fast. Mm-hmm. That has to spin to get the do goal to be spinning.
Yeah.
And then subsequently what happens? And now click, I'm got a little bit healthier.
Right.
Right. Or if it's, I want to be a particular weight. I do all these things day to day, moment to moment, to where now I can say I'm actually doing exercise. And then after weeks, days, months, click, I've lost a little weight. Right. Or click, my health is improved as shown by my blood sugar levels. Right. And so if the neat thing of seeing it in this gear system is that if that action goal stops, what happens? If the action gear stops, what happens?
It all stops.
It all stops.
Right.
And so the problem that we have in practice, I've seen more than not, is that we're very good about telling people about the B goal. Mm. We're actually very good at times about telling people the do goal. You need to do this. But where we fall short because of time, because of knowledge, because of whatever, maybe not thinking about it before, is what are all those little bitty things that you have to do for the next several days, weeks, months, years on a day in, day out level to keep the do goal spinning and subsequently to finally get to the goals that you have. So we have to focus more attention on that action goal than I think most of us do.
So on the action goal, I mean, on the gears, I mean, I love, visualization of things. It just makes it so much easier. But with this, could you say that each tooth of the gear is an actual action? Or would you say that maybe there's more than one action gear? I mean, how would you represent that to someone? Like, because if missing a tooth, you would stop it, right?
Yeah. I think the teeth is a neat way to see it. I picture as the inside of a watch, an old
Mm-hmm.
timey watch, an extremely complex. We have really isolated one be goal, one do goal, and one little action goal gear. But yeah, this is a complex system, gear system. Uh, you open up one of those watches, and you can see the inside and all this. And if this one breaks, and then you bring it to and that's what we feel like sometimes, right? We bring it to the watch maker and they go in with these fine tooth to find what's wrong and they fix. And this one little thing caused this whole system to stop. This valuable watch that I spent all this money on to stop. And it was that one little thing that did that. And so it is very complex. With that said, I think the good behaviors are complex because, again, as soon as I need to put my child in daycare, then there's these other action goals that pop up, right? Mm-hmm. That because I need to take this action. Well, now there's also these other steps. And so it starts building up on itself, I think, inadvertently, so to speak, just by the nature of human behavior. But to your point, I think there are gears in that watch that probably shouldn't even be there, that are spinning. So there's two things. One, like you're mentioning, could either it's a missing tooth or a gear that just clogs it up. Mm-hmm. And that would be something like goal conflict. That would be a gear that it's something that I want in there, right? So I want to eat unhealthy at times. So I keep this food in the house. So I want to have a brownie every once in a while, even if it's a plant-based, but it's real high in sugar or something, or not. Or I want to go eat out every so often, or I want to have some booze, or I want to sit on the couch and not exercise tonight. I want to just sit and watch a movie. That's cool, man. We need that sort, so we have to be obsessed with this stuff. And so how do we find that balance? Well, it's tricky with people that do struggle with self-control, because I could have intent to go home and cook grab a fruit, grab a vegetable, whatever I want to make. But then, as we talked earlier, open that freezer and there's the ice cream. Now all of a sudden my mind's like, oh man, you like eating ice cream too. That's a goal that you have, is to eat ice cream. A goal is also to eat healthy, but man, that ice cream. And again, if they want to have a little bit, that's their prerogative. But if I struggle with self-control, that can be problematic. And we talk about making provisions for the flesh and how certain folks probably should not even keep that in. And I might have mentioned this last time, but I asked people, how easy is it for you to eat unhealthy in your house? Mm-hmm. So how easy is it for you to eat unhealthy in your house? If somebody says, well, it's pretty easy, that's problematic, because we have those goals. And you talk about this in the context of habit. Mm-hmm. As we were talking beforehand, unhealthy food, high fat, high sugar food is extremely rewarding for the brain, the dopaminergic system, right? It is extremely rewarding. Mm-hmm. We remember context. We want more. We crave it. And our frontal lobe wants to elaborate. There's this theory called the elaborated intrusion theory of desire. And so we crave and desire and crave and desire. So it's very easy to develop a habit to do those sort of things, whether it be food or sex or whatever other fleshly desires that we have. There's reward systems that are set up in our brain to facilitate that habitual response. Being inactive, conserving energy, is definitely one of those as well. And so it's not hard for me to develop that habit per se, right? Because it's very rewarding. I do not get that same biochemical, the hormonal response from eating a piece of broccoli. Even if I controlled for it calorically, right? 200 calories of broccoli and spinach versus 200 calories of a candy bar. The brain's dopaminergic response is going to be completely different. Subsequently, the reward system is going to be different, and the embedding of a habitual response is going to be different, just at a physiological level. And so not only are we trying to develop new healthy habits that may or may not be rewarding, I think for some, eating a piece of broccoli is extremely rewarding. but it's not necessarily because of the physical nature of that piece of broccoli. It's because it's in line with their identity. It's in line with a standard that they have. It's reaching a goal that they've always wanted to do. And like somebody didn't want to try had a friend didn't want to try Brussels sprouts, and he tried them. He's like, oh man, these are pretty good. So he will try them again, right? Because he had a perspective, and it was counter to that perspective growing up as a child. And so there are those events, but it wasn't necessarily that the Brussels sprout produced this huge dopaminergic spike in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And so we have these unhealthy behaviors that become habitual. So as we're adopting new healthy habits, what are we also doing? We're also trying to break some bad ones. Mm-hmm. Breaking habits are extremely tough, right? So Dr. Lally, Lally, she has research on habit formation. I highly recommend for you and readers to check out her research. Dr. B.J. Fogg at Stanford, his lab, they're doing some neat research, FGG, that I highly recommend looking at, because they start to delve into some smaller steps to develop new habits and how to combat these other trouble habits. And clearly, getting rid of that gear would be a first start. If you struggle with that, it might be a good, in spiritual worlds, sometimes we talk about fasting to give us a perspective. It might not be a full day. It might just be one meal. And not eating fast food when I want it, that's going to make me feel negative. If my norm is to drive through fast food for dinner, get me and the kids, and not being able to do that when I'm in a time crunch and I'm busy and I'm stressed from work and I got to get kids here and I forgot to prepare anything, all of a sudden, not going through there would be a negative experience for me. It would produce cognitive dissonance and mental distress. And the process of dealing with that is going to be, in and of itself, a process of breaking those things and going through those emotions. And we haven't even talked about adding in the healthy options as a part of that. So that's one aspect, that gear. There's also gears in there that we think are working, but aren't really connected. And this is sort of like helping people see what the right standard is. It's also helpful to make sure we see what the right behaviors are. And there are certain behaviors that make me feel emotional. We talked about marathon, earlier. So there are examples where people are doing a behavior they think is going to work. I bought this infomercial contraption, like I talk about on fitness pudding all the time. I bought this and I think it's going to make me lose weight. Or I'm trying this diet, or I'm taking this supplement, or I'm thinking this way, this new mental tricks, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to whatever, and it doesn't work. If they really believe it's going to work, what can happen is, especially if they lump that behavior into exercise. So let's say I buy some contraption that jiggles me or sucks me or whatever it does, like bounces or electrical current, and I got to move my arms while I do it. And so I think of it as exercise, or a particular exercise routine, 21 day to fitter body, whatever. I try that and it doesn't work. Let's say it probably would have never worked anyway. But if I think it's exercise, then what I'm prone to do is to say, you know what, I tried exercise and exercise doesn't work for me. Or I tried some fad diet, and based on the basic foundation of that diet, it's not going to work. And we know that, but they don't. They think it's going to work. They try it. And let's say I'm in that boat and I try that, and then I get done and it doesn't work. You know what? If I lump that into healthy eating, I now think I tried healthy eating and healthy eating doesn't work for me. We hear it all the time. I need you to eat this. I've already tried that. Did you really, or did you try something similar that you're attributing to healthy eating, that you're attributing to exercise? And so that's the gear that I picture off to the side, that it's spinning, man. I'm doing it. Action, do. I'm doing it. It just doesn't connect to the B goal or the true do goal and the action goals that we want them to do. There could be carryover. People can start a fad diet and learn a lot about themselves. And people can do juicing. They can do all these other things that may not necessarily be bad, but it starts developing some action goals that we can use. And people can do this in other areas of their life too, like their family life or their corporate life. They develop these little habits, and we can use the strength of those, the skill sets that they have, and just apply it. Look, you're already really good at managing your time. There it is, spinning out there.
It's not connecting to their other gears, to create this B goal.
That's it. And then the last thing would be, you mentioned the little tooth falling off. I usually show it as like these wedges that come in and embed themselves in the middle of these gears and like just stops everything.
A monkey
That would
wrench.
be monkey wrench. It would be barriers. Barriers that we experience can throw the wrench in this gear system. And you think about a lot of this, there's so many analogies you can develop out with this, right? Rusty gears because I haven't done it in so long. And I need oil. What does oil represent? And maybe that's love from the practitioner and a pat on the back, social verbal persuasion. I mean, there's so many cool ways to think through this gear analogy when it comes to self-regulation of behavior and how we can conceptualize that. But I think that even though I spent a little longer on that than I probably planned, but that gear system might be a way for the folks listening to sort of conceptualize setting goals and where to make sure the emphasis is to help people regulate the behavior day to day and what might influence that, both good and negative ways.
So barriers.
Is that a wrench?
Yes.
Barrier. There it is. See? And is that a mustache on the barrier?
No, that's his teeth. He's like,
oh, see, I can't see the teeth. Either way.
He's throwing his wrench in the middle of the gear shift there.
That's right.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, we don't even know sometimes what barriers are until we actually do some inflection and insight and not even realize what some barriers might be. Some even mental, emotional barriers that we could uncover.
No, until you do it. That's right. It's a learning process until you do it. And I always recommend for practitioners and patients to test it and to say, you haven't exercised in a while. We're going to just try. You feel pretty confident with one day this week. So we're just going to try it. And then what I want to do when you come back in, I want to talk about how that went because you didn't do it. That's okay. Why didn't you do it? Let's learn from that. Or, man, I wanted to eat healthy, but oh my gosh, I saw this or crave this. Well, that's cool. I don't care if you didn't do it right now, but if you didn't do it, then let's learn from that, right? And this is a whole process of true self-monitoring is usually built around feedback. And it's talking about things and trying to understand when we do well and when we don't do well. And then if you do well, don't just check off the list and move on either. How in the world did you make that happen? You had everything working against you. But you made it happen. So let's talk about that. Let's harness all the great things that were going on that allowed that to happen.
Celebrate it. Absolutely. So changing failure to feedback and taking what you actually did and not poo-pooing it, but celebrating it. It's like, well, let's do that again,
Yeah, that's right. And, and people talk about personality and all these other traits and I don't necessarily see so somebody could come to me and say, look, I want to try to lose weight, but I have failed at losing weight or maintaining my weight loss 10 times in the past. You've also been successful at weight loss 10 times in the past. We're just missing that one little 2, 3, whatever little things to carry you to the next step. So, you've already been successful numerous times. And so again, it is changing that paradigm to how we view. And as Dr. Janegi always talks, it's not that you failed; it was just a slip up. We put so much weight on. It's not only failure to feedback. Maybe it's failure to hiccup to feedback. It's like it's just you didn't fail. So the other day I didn't go work out. I wanted to. I didn't. I didn't fail. I just didn't go work out. And that's it. We don't have time to talk about it, but talk about emotions. And there's this whole neat thing that I've been working about in my book on the theology and health that we were talking about earlier, and conviction and guilt. And, those are called self-conscious emotions: guilt, shame, pride. And there's this really neat line of research, this group that's looking at those kind of emotions, how they relate to health behavior. And like guilt was positively correlated with physical activity behavior, but shame was negatively associated. And guilt would be is what they say is, guilt would be the negative feelings that are associated because of the behavior. Like I didn't do the behavior. So I didn't go to the gym. The didn't go, that's guilt. Shame would be I didn't, would be putting the blame on me. And that doesn't go as well. But I don't have to become a lesser person or low self-esteem because I don't go exercise. I might feel guilty a little guilt from that, but you feel guilty because you didn't match up to some standard that you had previously set.
And I think people equate guilt and shame, and that's where we run into problems.
Yeah, technically they are different.
Right, absolutely.
And as we've talked about, godly shame versus or grief and worldly grief, and there's a whole other side.
We should do a podcast on theology and health.
You let me know. Let's do it.
I've got so many ideas for you. I'm just going to pry your little brain open every time we talk. Yeah, absolutely. That's really brilliant. I mean, it really makes sense. I mean, everything you're saying it's like a little aha moments all in my head when I think back to patients and what you're describing.
Yeah.
What worked. People, I had good success with patients. And when I'm thinking about when I was on, I would say the last year and a half of trying to discover what it was that I was doing that was working. That's why I started the podcast, why I wanted to talk to people, talk to experts. And I think, honestly, you're one of the few that I've really got the most out of as far as looking back into my own discovery as a practitioner, what I've been able to use just by accident, seeing, or maybe had some intuition, of what was working.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably what makes you a very good practitioner and a good, and coaches do it, right? Mm-hmm. I think patients and other practitioners, they stumble onto something. They may not have the technical term for it. Right. They may not have read the research on it, but they're like, this athlete, I have to motivate this way. We see it with our kids, like this athlete, I got to handle them this way. But what got to that point was trial and error. Mm-hmm. It took handling that child, that athlete, that patient, that client, myself in the wrong way, maybe too many times to get that where it is, I had this odd conversation with somebody about how I was frustrated I couldn't get soap to sud on a rag in the shower, like this new soap. So we're so conscious about all these environmental toxins, right? And you scan stuff and you get soaps that are actually decent and then they don't sud up. It's like, is it the wrong soap? Well, if I use this, is there a certain way that I can? And so it's like this process of trial and error. If I keep the rag, or do I got to get a loofah, or what are all the things? And then I'm a guy with a loofah, and then,
but there was a discrepancy between what you thought clean was with sudsy soap, right?
Or do I just say, do I really need to be that clean? Like, can I just use my hands and, well, no, I got to do that. And does anybody know? And so it's very complex behavior, but it started out with soap not sudding on a rag. So, but it would be trial and error to figure all this out. Right. And at some point I might have, if you come back and ask me, I might have, look, if you want to sud up the rag with healthy soap, I got the way to do that. And so buy this soap, use this, do this, whatever. But
that's another podcast altogether.
That's
how to set up your soap.
Here's the thing. If you get to that point, you can move on. I don't know if it's a bad news day.
Oh no. So, gosh.
But
wow.
Let me end with this. Can I end with this last thought before we
please.
Go? Please. Is the really, if I can, even if I want you to start thinking about it, and those listeners, is I've really been conceptualizing all this, as we always try to simplify things down, as you mentioned, is very complex. I want to think about it now is the why, the what, and the how. Mm-hmm. So the what, all these three things all need to happen when it comes to developing healthy habits, in my belief now. So the what is what the prescription is. Whole food, predominantly plant-based diet, eat food, not too much, mostly plants, 7 to 13 servings fruit and vegetables a day, whatever the prescription is, that's the what. Physical activity, 30 plus minutes of moderate intensity physical activity at least 5 days a week, so 150 minutes per week, ideally shooting for 60 minutes or more, if not all days of the week. If we're using steps, at least 5,000 steps, to not be sitting too much, 7,500 steps. Is a general health guideline. 10,000 is great too, or however many we want to get. Mm-hmm. That's the what. And as you and I were talking, I think we're at a point now where I'm recognizing that we just find new ways to repackage the what. I don't think that's bad. Okay, so don't hear that. But I think it's not enough if we're talking about developing like lifestyle. If
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle is medicine, right? How do we deal with actually changing and developing lifestyles? Um, I think what you have to do is the what is in the middle, then you got to move back to the why. So we have to help people find their why. And other people have talked about this. It's not a new concept. What I've found in my research is there tends to be 7 areas that can be discrepant, as we talked earlier, and initiate and be threatened for a why. And in general, and we can talk more about those later, but in general, if your self-esteem is threatened, the early research in this, Susan Folkman and others in 1986 did a study looking at marital stress, and they found that situations were stressful in marriage if one, self-esteem was threatened or at stake, or if the well-being of the significant other was threatened. So whatever the scenario was, if either one of those two things were threatened, it was stressful or deemed as stressful by the couple. And so, or by the individual. Well, I think self-esteem is an area. If we think that's threatened, then it's going to produce some distress. I think there's areas, general term that I use as sex, which this would be also related body image, attractiveness, looking a certain way, getting a mate, maintaining a mate, whatever it is, right? So the kind of that general category. Social status would be the other one, keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. Fourth would be survival, would be the fourth S. So self-esteem, sex, social status, survival, which would be more about avoidance of disease avoidance. And then we would have spirituality as the fifth S, and how that drives our behavior and our identities and the decisions that we make. We might already attach smoking or drugs, right? In the spiritual realm, we might believe in the Christian faith, for example, we believe that doing that behavior would destroy God's temple, our body, before its time prematurely. And we might lump drugs into that. If you ask somebody about drugs, they might say, yeah, that's why I don't do drugs, because it's destroys the body. And you're like, that's right. And it's what, 25,000 deaths per year right now, drug abuse. It's way too many, and it's tragic. But that's 1.8% of the deaths that come from poor diets, inactivity, and obesity at 1.4 million. And so, or close to that. So drug deaths are terrible, and they do destroy the body before its time, but it's not the leading causes of premature death. These other behaviors are, but if I don't connect poor diet with that, I don't feel discrepant in that spirituality thing, or that fifth thing, spirituality, then I may not connect it. Or if spiritual faith is not important to me, but social status is. And so there's negative and goods to all this, because again, if I'm preaching disease avoidance and that doesn't matter to them, but social status does, and we don't talk about that and find that why, then they could be doing some dangerous things to keep up with that perception of social status. And social status informs a number of things like self-esteem. The other two ones that we see is physical function, and feeling discrepant there. And the last one would be that we've seen is family. Again, there's probably more, but those we consistently see over and over, time and time again.
Is there a validated questionnaire or something that we could use to discover that a little bit faster in a
yeah, not yet. I'm working on that. I got some students that are working on that research, so that we can come out with ideally one for the practitioner. With scale development is tricky because one item type scale is like one for faith, one for or spirituality, one for self-esteem. It's tricky because of the statistical validation of that. But in practice, it would make the most sense. And so we're working on that to kind of get that out. But at the same time, my why for doing things might be general like that, like for my role in my family, or for health, disease avoidance, or whatever. But today, I talked to someone not too long ago. They were getting ready to go work out in our facility. We have a little workout facility, and she said, I got to get in those capri pants. That's my why today, is capri pants to fit into. And so something happened the day before where they tried them on, they didn't fit, and like, oh my gosh, I got to. So that was her why today.
Mm.
Cool. It might not be her why tomorrow. But if the thing is, if somebody knows what to do and we preach what to do, but they can't find the why to do it. I told you about the gentleman that asked me, why in the world would anybody eat 10 servings of fruit and vegetable a day?
Right.
If he can't find his why, I can tell him blue in the face my why, because of health and disease and mortality and whatever. But if none of that connects on an organic, personal way, then it's not going to happen. And again, I don't know how to create that, but again, like you said, it's more of helping connect,
Discovery.
find, discover their why.
Yeah, because I think that's one thing I always had struggled with younger people, because my goal would be to start with young ones. It's easy when they're little and get the mom and dad's why they want their kids to grow up healthy. But when you get these young adults, like, when I brought home the whole food plant-based diet, my kids were teenagers. So finding a why for them was like, I feel fine. Why should I do this? In that whole
Yeah.
shebang. But what was interesting, there was some different interesting stuff. We turned it into being cool. It was, my kid, one of them just relished being the only vegan. The other one was, wow, she might have gained a few pounds in college. Maybe I should do this and she feels better. Or her boyfriend was doing it and now she's doing it because he found this was to be better. And she wants that social status with him. I'm not quite back to the mom knows everything yet. She'll get there. But then, the other one was that he could put on muscle and be leaner than eating high doses of meat. So, or the environmental aspect, looking at the environment. So yeah, like you said, the young ones I found, I was really struggling too with the younger crowd, but it all goes back to finding their why. And that's why I love the book by Simon Sinek, is just, the why, you gotta go look for it. Yeah.
You got to go look and discover. All right. So let's say somebody has found the why.
Okay.
And they know what to do.
Yep.
But they don't know how to do it. It falls apart as well. And so we personally, professionally, we are putting much more effort in helping people find the why, discover the why, and how to do it. And what I mean is very specifically, we have the general hows, like how do I do it when time, cost, motivation are barriers, when I don't enjoy it, when I'm distracted, when that, all the common general barriers, but then even very specific things, as you and I were talking about, a single mom raising, 4 kids, how does she do it? Or if I'm on a budget, or if the only thing I have within 15 miles is a convenience store, and I don't have fresh food around. There's here in Texas, we have food deserts where people just don't have access to fruits and vegetables. And so we talk whole food, plant-based diet, but they don't even have them in their county. They have to drive 15, 20, 30 minutes to a grocery store. And so they hear, so you want me to eat 10 fruits and vegetables a day when, even in Texas, the median serving of vegetables, intake of vegetables, 1.6 servings per day of vegetable. And so, yeah, the whole food plant-based diet sounds great, and it is great, and the data supports it as great. But how in the world can I do this when I don't have money, I don't have access, and nobody's here to help me? My family doesn't want to do it. They give me a hard time for transitioning. Luckily, your kids transitioned somewhat amiably. But what about the kids and the husbands and the wives and people who are fighting it and saying, why in the world are you trying to change me? And so that is a very, very complex process. I think we can start by, in an amiable way, as accommodating the general barrier, the hows, the general hows. We know time is going to be an issue for almost everybody, right? And people listening to this podcast, if you're not eating 10 fruits and vegetables per day, then what would need to happen to allow you to do that, right? What are the hows? And finding ways to do that. Rachel Ray and her quick recipes, and I think there's cool ways to do that. There's Pinterest and DIY this and DIY that, and all these clever, neat ways to accommodate the how. And so we are focusing now on trying to build out curriculum and videos and things behind the scenes right now to be able to launch on helping people make sure they know the what, because a lot of people don't even know the what. Find their why, discover their why, and then learn how to do it. And I think those three things are a simple way for practitioners to start thinking about moving forward with each patient, moving them into a process, a lifestyle of developing healthy habits.
And that's really why I'm interviewing, is my book is on the how-to component, because what I found 5.5 years ago when I started this was with the plant-based diet, working with patients, the how question kept coming up. I think just in the way my relationships with patients, I already knew a lot of whys, and I like to get deep in those relational type questions with patients. So that wasn't so much of an issue, finding the why. Certainly with some it was, obviously. And the what was obviously plant-based diet, exercise. But then the how, I developed 30-page handout and would give it to every single patient. It talked about time. Perfect. It talked about excuses, about families, about cravings. It talked about budget. It talked about everything. And that really was a framework for this book now, is because like, this will answer your questions, but I want to bring in even more experts, because there's more to that, like the behavior stuff that's so integral that the experts have that I don't know. So that's fabulous.
Or you know what? Not even the experts. I tell you what, I can talk to my mom and learn a lot about how to do things. Right. When it comes to rearing children, or cooking this, or doing this, or learning this, or I could go to meet with a lot of people that aren't, nerd experts per se, like academics, like the nerds that me and, but it's stuff, they are experts, so to speak, when it comes to common sense and wisdom and trial and error and living it. And we surround ourselves, as you talked earlier about being mentored, and we surround ourselves with wise people who have been through it. It's not that they've gotten it right every time, because they wouldn't be wise if that's the case. Right. Wise is the whole point of messing up and then getting back up and learning from that and moving forward. And to be wise, for me to be wise, is to learn from wise people. And so patients being able to interact with others who have been able to do it. And how did you make that happen? Mm-hmm. And as you know, if you eat healthy around other moms, and they're like, how do you do that? How do you convince your kids? How do you not stop at McDonald's? How do you not stop here? How do you, right? I mean, we can learn so much from each other.
And that's what I did. And I would start talking to them, like, well, how did you do that? How did you do this? And what was interesting is there were so many good stories. Again, that was one of the reasons I started the podcast, is so I can go back, I can chronicle, I can put this in a form. I can go listen here to this patient or this person who lost 320 pounds, or this mom who's feeding her kids a healthy diet with a husband who doesn't want to. And I have both those podcasts, and say, this, you will relate to this person. So there is hope there. And so
that's right.
That is.
And you could go back and listen to all those, and you could find the why, the what, and the how, and all of those for that individual.
Right.
And the more that we can start kind of conceptualize around that. And what's funny about experts, so like in this world of behavioral medicine and psychology research, the information that I learn is from the participants in the study, and those participants are not. So everything I know is derived from
non-experts
anyway. And so technically I'm not an expert in anything. They are the ones that have shed light on all this stuff, on perceptions and how they respond to things. And so everything that we know is from the quote unquote but I'm an expert of non-experts, or whatever you want to call it.
But you're the expert in collective knowledge. You're looking at all of this data and then pulling out the most tangible, most important thing to benefit the rest of us. So that's a very special skill.
Maybe so, but not to lose sight of
where it really came from. Right?
Where it comes from. That's
just
right.
Like protein came from plants originally for all of us. So
that's right.
It just kind of falls into that same realm. Boy, bless your heart, I took way more time than we.
That's great, but I am going to have to let you go, because I go jump to another thing. But
cool. We really I'm going to say thank you and acknowledge you and say thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording. 1 sec.